Let's just kick this off with a hypothetical. You're vegan. You go to a vegan protest. You meet someone else who introduces themselves as vegan. You decide to go back to this guy's house. He owns a cat. You think, okay, that's normal. There are vegans who own cats. And you ask him, so tell me, do you buy cat food that's made out of dead animals? Do you buy, a tin can that has a chopped up cow, a chopped up lamb in it? What do you do with this cat? Do you try to feed the cat a vegan diet? He says, no. I also have pet rats. Oh, really? Okay, well that's not so unusual these days. You meet vegans who keep rats as pets, but what do you mean? And he says, here, let me show you. He takes you upstairs and he has 2 rooms in his house. One is full of cages with his pet rats, and the other is for his cats to lie around in. He says, yeah, I raise the rats over here. Then every day I take a few of them, kill them, and feed them to my pet cats in the other room. I think you would be horrified. I think that anyone would be horrified. Not just vegans. I think a meat eater would find that psychologically disturbing, and I think the average vegan would find that ethically wrong. Why? Why is it that the same people who make excuses for buying a dead cow cut up and put into a little metal can to feed to a cat, which is completely unnatural? In the wild, a cat would never kill and eat a cow. That those same people think it's immoral for you as a vegan to kill a rat to feed to your cat or to kill rats under any circumstances. I have an earlier video on this channel that I encourage you to go back and take a look at. That's called Vegans Kill Rats. A lot of people misunderstood the point of that video. I do not believe that killing rats is okay. I do not believe that vivisection on rats is okay. I'm morally opposed to all vivisection. But I am willing to talk about the ethical contradictions, difficulties, and paradoxes that being a vegan leads us into. And one of those paradoxes, of course, is the whole paradigm of pet ownership and domesticated animals existing within veganism. Hey, what's up? Shout out to all my viewers in Siberia. A lot of research on Siberia lately. Keep that on the right pile. No. Vegans and their excuses for owning pets. One of the things I find tragicomic is that on the one hand, vegans in 2016 want to engage in an over-the-top denunciation of animal ownership as slavery. Understandable. Some people get offended by the comparison. Some people respond positively. Some people are just confused by it. And some vegans, I think a minority, do know enough about the history of slavery to say something intelligent in making this comparison. Others, like I've mentioned before, the material from Direct Action Everywhere, I think they seem to have no sincere interest in the history of slavery, and they seem to make a sort of dishonest use of this history, misrepresenting what it does and doesn't have in common with the struggle for animal rights to reform or abolish animal agriculture, etc., etc. My point is here, intelligent things can be said in making this comparison. Stupid things can be said also. Sometimes people are offended by this for no good reason. Sometimes they're offended for a good or understandable reason. These are the types of awkward gray areas we all have to deal with in politics today. Just to mention offhand, so I've been doing a lot of research lately on Soviet Union, on Russian communism. You can compare some aspects of Russian communism to slavery, but do you really know enough to say something intelligent about this? Of course, the comparison isn't perfect. What they did with the gulags, with captive labor, and so on, it's not exactly slavery, and there are many important ways in which it's different from slavery, but still, not a simple case of saying, how dare you say that, or what have you. Maybe you've got something intelligent to say, and maybe you don't. I'm about to alienate about 50% of my audience, but that's okay. In fact, that's the essence of what I've got to do here on YouTube. The fact that your dog is happy from your perspective as a human being does not vindicate or exculpate the system of the domestication of animals at all. Not even 1%. It doesn't mean it's okay. All right? And the parallelism here is the fact that your slave may be happy in a slave system of slave ownership, that you personally may own a slave who is happy from your perspective as an owner, does not vindicate the system of slavery even one bit. Okay? And if you've studied any particular example of slavery historically, whether in Sri Lanka or Haiti or the United States, ancient Egypt or ancient Greece, of course, there are examples of individual slaves who are happy. And that may, of course, be in part because that individual slave knows that his or her status is much better than other slaves just next door or just in the backyard or just on the plantation. It may be because their particular owner treats them very graciously or what have you. It is true in every slave society, you could find individual slaves who were happy from their own perspective. And of course, much more commonly, you found slave owners who were convinced that their slaves were happy from the owner's perspective. And to say that this does not vindicate the system of slavery is the understatement of the millennium. All right? So the fact that you believe that your dog is happy relative to your perspective as a human being, as the human being who owns the couch that the dog lies on, to me is the stupidest, most fatuous, most immoral thing I've ever heard out of a vegan's mouth. And I've been hearing it, let me tell you, in response to my earlier videos. I made one earlier video called Vegans Kill Rats. Please do not judge that by its title. It's a nuanced argument. I'm not saying it's okay to kill rats. I'm not saying it's okay to perform vivisection on rats. I believe vivisection is completely immoral. I believe killing rats is morally bad. However, I'm willing to reflect on the complexities and paradoxes we all get led into in real life. Real life involves hard decisions, like killing rats, even when you think it's a bad thing. Sometimes that's the sort of thing we have to take responsibility for as vegans. Life is full of nasty and brutal contradictions. And, there are vegans who join the military and kill human beings. This is real life. It's what it's about. And I don't pursue I don't pursue consistency as an end in itself. Consistency is important. Rationality is important. But it's also part of a mature perspective on the world, a mature perspective on ethics, to be able to recognize and talk about with detachment the circumstances in which we ourselves become hypocrites, the contradictions and paradoxes that life in practice draws us into. Why is it that there's such a difference between the excuses these vegans make for house pets, such as dogs and cats? Let's just stick with dogs for this video. And the way they regard a monkey kept in captivity. All right? If I had a monkey in my apartment here, you would not give a fuck if I told you that the monkey was happy. Doesn't matter. My perspective does not matter. Any of you would be asking the hard questions. You'd be saying, well, look, you say this monkey is happy, but, it doesn't really have the kind of habitat it would have in the wild. Oh, no, don't worry, it's happy. I can even show you photographs on Instagram. I can film him and put him on YouTube and show you how happy he is. Maybe I can even compare him to monkeys being kept in a cage, the conditions at the zoo or the conditions at the lab, and say, look, my monkey is really happy. I treat him better than some other monkeys. Maybe my next door neighbor has a monkey that's being kept in much worse conditions. I can compare him to that. The comparisons are irrelevant. How about that monkey's life in the wild? It involves both sex and violence. If you really get into reading, and again, I think vegans just do not read this kind of material. I can sympathize to some extent, but I don't. The people who try, to help out monkeys that are either rescued from the circus or rescued from labs, people who are in the gray area of having these domesticated animals that can't be returned to the wild. The sex and violence are some of the hardest things to deal with. We've rescued these chimpanzees, but it doesn't mean you can return them to a Garden of Eden. Now you've got them and they're trying to kill each other, and you got to separate them into separate cages. Maybe you, ideologically, you thought you were freeing these animals from cages. You didn't want to put them in a cage. You've got some kind of habitat. You put them in there. They start trying to kill each other. Now you put them back in cages, which they're comfortable with because they live. These kinds of and you realize, oh my God, these animals have competitive behaviors, violent behaviors, and sexual behaviors that are extremely difficult for human beings to manage, in a domesticated scenario. You're vegan, you own a dog. Is your dog spayed or neutered? Really think about what that means. If I owned a chimpanzee as a pet, would it be neutered? Would I take it and perform a medical operation on it to deprive it of its natural instincts and behaviors so that it could be a better companion to me? What does that mean? What are the implications of that? And it's so easy for people to think that way, to question that way, when it's a monkey or a lion. They'd say, oh, well, this is immoral. Having a lion with its balls chopped off, a neutered lion, kept in a cage or kept in your living room just to amuse you. Oh, that's immoral. But a cat, doing the same thing with a house cat, you see this as morally acceptable? Why? That is speciesism. For all of the BS talk about speciesism and slavery, that difference, that excuse you're making for a dog or a house cat that you wouldn't make for a lion or you wouldn't make for a chimpanzee, that is real speciesism, and it's really a problem within veganism. Even within vegan activists, people who consider themselves devoted vegan activists, all right? This indicates just how deep this problem runs and how little any of these people care about the wild, about wilderness and habitat conservation as a moral baseline. Not a dog who's had its balls chopped off sitting on your couch pretending to be a human for your amusement, for your companionship, okay? In the wild, that dog would kill and eat you. Wild dogs kill and eat human beings. You think having a piglet as a pet is cute? Not only, okay, wild boars in the wild. You want to Google this right now? It'll disturb the hell out of you. Do a Google search for wild boar eating deer. In the wild, pigs kill and eat large mammals like deer. They are true omnivores. They will kill a deer and strip the flesh off it raw. They will eat the corpse directly. Human beings can't do that. Human beings think of themselves as omnivores, but we're physically incapable of tearing apart and eating a corpse like a deer or even a pig or what have you off the ground. Pigs, the cute cuddly pigs, if you know people from the backwoods, they'll tell you in the old days when people would commit a murder, one of the easiest ways to cover it up, to destroy evidence, to make it harder for the police to investigate, was to take the human body and throw it into a pig pen. Domesticated pigs, in a few hours, would tear apart the corpse and eat the flesh off a human corpse. That's your cute, cuddly pig. What is it that makes it so cute and cuddly? Depriving it of the wilderness, depriving it of socialization with access to members of its own species. You think it's cute for a human being to hold a baby bottle and feed a piglet? I don't think that's cute. Where's that pig's mother? Right? Where's that pig's pack? Its social organization. A pig or a wolf grows up in a pack that socializes it to have the instincts and behaviors that it needs to survive. That it needs to compete within its own species, that it needs to ultimately kill members of other species, including human beings, because we are naturally the enemies of these other species in the wild, including pigs, including wild boars. If you encounter a wild boar or even a feral boar in the woods, it's terrifying, even if it's alone, let alone in a pack. This reminds me of different stories. I knew a guy in Southeast Asia, and he had lived in an abandoned coconut farm. So someone had tried to make money with coconuts, and they'd given up. And there were wild pigs living in this abandoned coconut plantation. And the jaws of an adult pig are so powerful that a whole fresh coconut, not a dried coconut, a fresh coconut, they can crack it open and then eat the flesh inside. And the result was, on this particular patch of land, these wild pigs became absolutely enormous because they could eat unlimited amounts of fat, basically, from these coconuts. And, of course, they hunted other mammals, including, if they had a chance, human beings. And also, this wasn't a normal forest with forest cover. You know, the trees all grow up tall and straight with gaps between them because it's a man-made coconut plantation. So these pigs could really chase you down through the alleys between the trees. It was absolutely terrifying. This is man and pig meeting in the wild, and you want to take this animal and deprive it of its socialization, deprive it of its natural habitat, deprive it of its instincts, and ultimately deprive it of its sexuality, which is one of the most uncomfortable things to talk about, right? You think your dog is happy, the dog that sleeps on your couch. You think that dog, 1, didn't want to know its own mother. 2, you think that dog didn't want to be a parent itself. The dog didn't want to be a father or a mother, depending on its gender. You think that dog doesn't want to have sexual relations within its own species, and to compete with other members of the species. How are you going to provide that? You can take away the wild from an animal. You can never give it back. You can cripple an animal mentally and physically so that it can't survive in the wild. But can you do the reverse? It's so strange to me that vegans themselves are so deeply conditioned by speciesism that they see these problems when it's a monkey or a lion, but they don't see it, or they refuse to see it when it's a cat or a dog. And the excuse is, I love my dog, I love my cat. The hell you do. Okay? What does it mean to love a lion? It means you respect it enough to give it its autonomy and its independence and to live in the wild at least most of the time. I think human beings can have interesting and meaningful interactions with wild animals. And I could tell stories about that too. I mean, I used to live on the edge of the last jungle that's now been completely cut down in Thailand and Laos. People who really live around wild animals, you can sometimes have friendly encounters, even with wild bears. I mean, it's surreal, but it happens. You can talk to anyone about this, but that's nothing like the system of domestication. And as I say, the system itself remains bad, just like the system of slavery, even if individual slaves are happy, even if individual animals are happy. And if you know about the real history of slavery, it wasn't all people living at a distance from their slaves. One of the ways in which slavery is profoundly corrupting the human spirit is that people would have their own children raised by slaves. So they'd live in a house in a very intimate way with their slaves. If you go to Southeast Asia, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, you may notice, you may not, if you're if you're not sensitive, if you're not observant, there are still these really strange cultural prohibitions about the level you sit at. And culturally, before Western influence, none of those people sat on chairs. Traditionally, you'd be sitting on the floor, or you'd sit with a very small pillow, raising you up above the floor by a few millimeters. This kind of thing is traditional. And interesting, that's also a contrast to Chinese culture. When the Chinese would visit Southeast Asia, they thought these people were barbarians because they didn't sit in high chairs. But anyway, Europe and China had a chair-based culture, and Southeast Asia did not. It was a floor-sitting culture. But they still today, in many contexts, they are very particular about who is sitting higher than whom. Now, one of the reasons for that, Cambodia, traditionally, that was often the only difference between slaves and masters when they sat to eat at the same table in the same household. The slaves would sit a little further down the table, and they would sit directly on the floor as opposed to sitting on a rattan mat or something, raise you up a bit. Now, Cambodia was very influential throughout the region. Many aspects of Thai culture, Lao culture, etc., are directly imitative of Cambodian culture, including the actual words for pillow and mat. A lot of that's, just mentioned interestingly, the sense in which those cultures were imitating aspects of Cambodian refinement for many centuries still show up even linguistically. But these cultural indicators of who is a slave and who is a free man, they can last for a long, long time, whether it's in Europe, in Asia, or what have you. But part of what makes slavery so disturbing when you study it in detail in any one culture is that it does involve the type of relations that vegans still have today with their pets. It does involve relations of love between unequal parties. It does involve entertainment. It involves the slaves singing and dancing for the master. It involves, the same way you say your dog sleeps on your couch, it involves the slaves sleeping on the master's couch, and a lot of really murky gray areas, which again make it very happy for people who benefit from the system of slavery to really perceive the ways in which this is profoundly corrupting and evil to society as a whole. The difference for us as vegans or just as people who own pets really is the juxtaposition between animals that we still think of as wild versus animals where we have forgotten or lost the reference point for wilderness. As I say, I think pigs are an example, along with cats and dogs, where people, including vegans, have given into a speciesist mentality and thus justify a form of slavery without even thinking it through, because they do not, when they think of a pig, whether as a cute piglet or as a farm animal, they do not think of a wild boar. They do not think of the behaviors of this animal well. Same for the dogs, same for the cats. Lions are different, by and large. Another weird category are whales and dolphins. I heard a very disturbing radio documentary that dealt with the bizarre and immoral relations between human beings and dolphins when dolphins were kept in quite small tanks in captivity. Basically, dolphins being kept in a swimming pool for scientific research. Now, this research did not involve torturing the dolphins. This particular research was not of that variety. They wanted to test dolphin intelligence, and they wanted the dolphins to be highly motivated and cooperative for these tests. Well, guess what? Dolphins have a sex drive. What are these human beings going to do when they have a dolphin in a tank and they're trying to keep it motivated and cooperative, and the dolphin is miserable, and among the instincts it can't exercise is its desire for sexuality? If you have a pet chimpanzee, you're going to know about that. Their sex drive is going to be a shocking and uncomfortable part of your life. If you have dolphins in captivity, anyone would know that. If you have a lion, most people, like whether they're a zoo or, again, some of these things are well motivated. These parks that are trying to rescue lions that used to be in the circus and give them a kind of comfortable retirement. One of the most bizarre things they complain about is of the lion, spraying human beings with their hormones. They can spray a liquid, hormone on people to mark them as their territory or what have you. These bizarre episodes people get into. Well, what compromise were you expecting the animal to make? Even when you put an animal through an immoral, humiliating, demeaning surgery to remove its reproductive organs, to remove those instincts, still that animal will have a stifled echo of its natural sexual desires and behavior that you're probably going to have to deal with, that is probably going to be an uncomfortable and embarrassing part of your life while this dog is decorating your couch or whatever, right? And yet people seem to recognize that this is creepy, this is immoral, this is wrong when it's a monkey on the couch, when it's a dolphin in that scientist's tank, a dolphin that needs to be relieved, shall we say. I'm keeping this a bit vague. The same problem can happen with birds that are being kept captive, including birds that are endangered and in captive breeding programs. The reasons for these things are not always pure evil. I mean, I've heard about people trying to keep goats as pets. I've met one person who kept goats as pets. Goats in anything resembling the wild, the violent territorial instincts, the competitions between the males, rutting bucks, the males butting heads and so on. What are you going to do to control those instincts? To turn this defiant, independent animal into your toy, into your slave, into your plaything. It's sick. Domestication of animals as your companions is sick. And if you claim your pet dog is happy, that is every bit as absurd to me as if you claimed your pet goat was happy, your pet lion was happy, your pet ape was happy. The hell it is.